Hey guys, Nathan Sprague here with Debt Freedom University, and we are sticking in the same spreadsheet template here, the Debt Freedom Matrix. We just went over how to properly enter all of our debt data into the upper table here above. And so now we are going to move to the lower left table here and focus on savings and investment accounts. So this should be hopefully self-explanatory, but there are a few nuances that I want to explain. Um, this is going to pertain to any account that you are contributing, savings and investments to, whether it be on a monthly basis or an annual basis. Um, Hopefully it's monthly, but you may have accounts that you maybe only contribute to once a year. If that's the case, divide that number by 12 and you can plug in the monthly equivalent here into this table. So these are monthly contributions. Again, it may not necessarily be a monthly contribution. It could be annually or what have you, but we need you to put in the monthly average amount to these accounts. So in our example here with the John Sample family, they've got a savings account that they're putting $100 per month into. Below that, they've got a Roth IRA that they're putting $200 per month into. And then before I get into the 401ks here, I will mention, as with the debts, this should coincide with your budget. So I've got a total of $300 per month here that they're contributing to savings and assets, investments every month. If I go back to my budget for this family, here under investments, you can see I've got $300, and that is what that $300 is in reference to. $100 to savings, $200 to the Roth IRA. So again, this should coincide with your budget. Below that, I've got the husband and wife 401k. Now there's a caveat here with the 401k, and it doesn't have to be a 401k. It could be a 457 or a 403b or a variety of retirement plans, but I've got two numbers here entered as an example for the sample family here. $150 a month for the husband and $80 a month for the wife. What I would recommend is that if your employer does not provide you an employer match to your contributions, again, whether it's 401k, 457, 403, whatever the account is, if they are not matching you dollar for dollar, then I would say you are better off not contributing anything to your 401k and instead taking those dollars and putting them towards your debt elimination plan. And that also applies to, the savings account and the Roth IRA. And so I want to take a second to describe the scenarios here and kind of my philosophies on this. So, first and foremost, I believe you should have emergency cash on hand to cover 6 months worth of expenses. So if I go back to the budget and, I know that the total monthly expenses for this family, let's call it $8,000. They need to have essentially $48,000, call it $50,000 saved, set aside as liquid cash for 6 months worth of, emergency expenses if they were to lose their job or something of those sorts. But if you've got that and you're still contributing to savings and investment accounts every month, and you've got debts to pay down, this whole table here in the lower left is what I refer to as what's potentially inefficient dollars or inefficient use of your dollars. And the reason I say it's inefficient is because if you do have enough savings set aside to cover 6 months of expenses, then in my opinion, if you're serious about wanting to pay down your debts more efficiently and ultimately have more money saved in the long run and put yourself in a better long-term financial position, you are better off putting these dollars towards paying down your debts than you are putting them into these investment accounts. And the reason is, for all of your debts that have above about a 3% interest rate, these dollars are going to do more for you. They're going to have a greater impact for any debt you have that has about a 3% interest rate or higher those dollars are going to be more effective and ultimately save you more money in interest on these debts or avoided interest on these debts than they will earn you inside of these accounts. Because the reality is the everyday saver investor rarely makes above about a 3% real rate of return. And I want to do a quick little calculation just to give you an example, because a lot of times people say, or you even hear, kind of celebrity advisors like Dave Ramsey saying, put your money into a mutual fund and you'll make 10 to 12% a year. That is not the case. That is simply not true. You might make 10% per year as an average rate of return, but I think that's where the confusion lies. And that's a lot of times where you hear financial advisors spewing numbers to people. They're always quoting average returns, and averages simply don't mean anything when you have a risk of loss. If you're putting that money into mutual funds or index funds into the stock market and you have risk of loss, average return does not mean real return. So I want to use an example. Let's say you put your money into a stock market based account, and over a 2-year period, let's say you gain 60% in year one. I'm gonna enter this data here, and then in year 2, you lose 40%. That'd be a negative 0.4. Let me change these to percentages to make this a little more clear. Okay, so you gain 60% in the first year, you lose 40% in the second year. Now I'll show you what that average rate of return is. If I select average right here, these two cells, you can see here, let's highlight this, that is a 10% average rate of return. How much money did you actually make over that period? What was your real rate of return? Well, let me show you. Now let's just use a very simple example. Let's say you started with $100. Okay, so you invested $100 to begin with. You made 60% in year one. So we'll take that 60% times your 100, and then we add that to your original investment. So you have $160 at the end of year one. Okay, well, that's the balance that you start year 2 with. Okay, year 2 you lost 40%, but you lost 40% of 160. Okay, let's see what that is. 40% of 160 is a $64 loss. So you take the $64 loss from the amount you started with that year. Oops, sorry, I should add those together. So that's going to be the $64 loss with the 160 you started with. Let me highlight this number. Look what you ended up with. Your ending balance was $96. You started with 100. You gained 60% the first year, lost 40% the second year, ended up the 2 years, your ending account balance was $96. So you actually lost a total of 4% over that 2-year period, a 4% loss. Yet, if you're looking at your prospectus, provided by your employer or whoever the third-party administrator or your financial advisor, whoever's providing that to you, they're going to show you a 10% average rate of return. And that number it's correct. It's just that number is meaningless. That's not the real cumulative, actual realized rate of return. The realized rate of return is you lost 4%. So that just goes into the nature of volatility and the effect of compounding, and that it works against you just as powerfully as it works for you. Losses actually carry more weight than gains, because you look at it right here. You made 60 and lost 40. If we're just looking at the numbers off the top of our head, off looking at an average, you should have made money, right? But you didn't. And that's because that 40% loss, or any loss, carries more weight than gains. And that's just due to the effects of compounding. It works against you more than it does for you. So the whole purpose of this example and this story is just to point out that if you're putting money aside into savings and investment accounts every month or every year, and you have debts to pay down, I can promise you are better off putting those dollars towards paying down those debts. You are going to save more money in interest, avoided interest payments, than you will earn money and interest in these accounts when you factor in the real rate of return, especially when you factor in fees associated with those accounts. Your advisor is going to charge you fees. There's tons of fees baked into 401ks and mutual funds. So to me, this is what I would consider inefficient dollars. We look at these debts we owe. All but one of these has an interest rate over 3%. The mortgage is 2.99, but all these other debts have an interest rate over 3%. So I promise you, you are better off putting these dollars towards paying down these debts and these higher interest rates than you would be investing those dollars into these accounts and only earning, on average, about an annualized real rate of return of about 3%. So keep that in mind. That is what I refer to as inefficient dollars. And specifically in regards to your employer accounts, so 401ks, 403bs, 457s, whatever it might be. If, I mentioned earlier, if your employer is not matching, enter that amount in here. If you're contributing and your employer is not matching, again, I would say we want to use those dollars towards paying down your debts rather than putting them towards those investments, because you're going to get more bang for your buck, literally paying those debts down. On the other hand, if your employer is matching, but let's say you're putting in more money beyond what they'll match, I would say, I always advise our clients and students that if your employer is matching, then that's a good thing. You're essentially getting 100% rate of return on that money. They're doubling your money. So continue doing that because they're matching you. If they're matching you dollar for dollar, continue doing that. But anything that you might be contributing in excess of what they're matching, enter that in here. And ultimately, what we, as I previously mentioned, we end up with is you've got all these extra dollars that we can then allocate towards this strategy and use more efficiently. And again, I can't stress this enough, but you'll get more bang for your buck putting those towards your debts and avoided interest that you'll avoid paying on your debts, such that you'll be able to pay these debts off faster. You'll avoid paying interest, and in the long run, you'll ultimately then have more freed up money in your free cash flow monthly budget to then more aggressively save for retirement in the future, and ultimately in the long run, you will be better off. So keep that in mind. That is what I call inefficient dollars. And again, enter the amounts and categories itemized that are applicable to you. In this example, we've got, what is that? A total of $530 per month of what I call inefficient dollars that we can then redirect towards this debt elimination strategy. So that's all for the bottom left table in the debt freedom matrix. I hope that made sense, and can't stress enough how we think about returns we're getting on our investments and how we weigh that against the idea of paying down debts. If I've got an interest rate on a debt that's 15% and I'm only earning 3% on an investment, my dollar is going to go a lot further paying down that 16% of interest than it is earning me interest at 3% in an investment account. It's as simple as that. And don't be misled by the average rates of return you see on many market-based investments. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this so we can get that cleaned up. But hope you found that informative. Again, reach out if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the next video.